This video will show you a different way of rearranging the formulas or solving the literal equations. For our first equation, we're solving for a, so we're going to describe the equation based on a. So therefore, when you write the description, you're going to start with a because that's the variable you're solving for. So the equation starts with a, and then the number beside the a is 5. So we know 5a means a is being multiplied by 5. And then it's added by 2f. And then equals, so therefore the equation ends with m. And when you write the equation for a, you're going to go backwards and then do everything the opposite. So instead of ends with m, you're going to start with m. Instead of adding by 2f, do the opposite. So you're going to subtract by 2f. Instead of multiplying by 5, you're going to divide it by 5. And it, instead of starts with a, it ends with a. And that's the equation when you isolate the a. So let's try the next one. So the next one we're solving for b. So therefore we're going to start, the equation starts with b. And then it's added by negative g, and parentheses means multiplied, so it's being multiplied by f. And then equals, so therefore the equation ends with n. So when we write the equation for b, you're going to go backwards and do everything the opposite. So instead of ends with n, you're going to start with n. Instead of multiplying, you're going to divide it by f. Instead of adding, do the opposite. So you're subtracting negative g. And then starts with b, so it ends with b. And you can simplify this equation. So this is the same thing as n over f. Negative g is same thing as plus g and equals to b. If you have a fraction in the equation, the process is exactly the same. You just have to do a little more simplifying at the end. So for this equation, we're solving for a, so we're going to start with a. The number in front of a is 3/4, so a is being multiplied by 3/4. And then it's being added by negative n to the third power, and the equation ends with y. So you're going to go backwards and do everything the opposite. So you're going to start with y. Instead of adding negative n to the third power, you're subtracting negative n to the third power, which is the same thing as plus n to the third power. Multiply, so the opposite, you're going to divide by 3/4, and then it ends with a. So to remove the fraction in the denominator, there's an invisible 1 on the numerator. So you're going to put parentheses around it and put 1 in front. And then you're going to do 1 divided by 3/4, which is the same thing as 4 over 3. And then just bring everything else down. So you have y plus n to the third power in the numerator. And that's the equation for the value of a. So let's try another one. So for our next equation, we're solving for d. So we're going to start with d. And d is being multiplied by 1/5 t, and then added by negative h, and then it ends with f. So now again, we're going to go backwards and do everything the opposite. So you're going to start with f. Instead of adding negative h, you're subtracting negative h, which is same thing as plus h. Multiply by 1/5 t, so you're going to divide it by 1/5 t. And then it ends with d. So again, to remove the 1/5 in the denominator, there's an invisible 1 on the numerator. And 1 divided by 1/5 is just 5. And then you just bring everything else down. So we have 5 times f plus h on the top. And the bottom we have a t, and that's the equation for the value of d. For this problem, the variable we're solving for is in the denominator. So what we have to do here is that we have to flip the fraction so that b is on the top instead of at the bottom. If we flip the first fraction, then we have to flip the other fraction. So this will become q over n to the third power instead. And now the rest of it, the process is the same. So you're going to start with b because that's the variable you're solving for, and then b is divided by d, and then it ends with the fraction q over n to the third power. So now you're going to go backwards and do everything the opposite. So we're going to start with q over n to the third power, and instead of dividing by d, it's being multiplied by d, and then it ends with b, and that's the equation for the value of b. So let's try the next one. So again, the variable we're solving for is in the denominator. So the first thing we have to do is to isolate this fraction by moving the q to the other side. So positive q is going to become negative q, so we have 2 minus q equals to f over b. So in order to flip this fraction, I need to make the other side as a fraction by putting 1 under it. So therefore, now my equation is going to become 1 over 2 minus q equals to b over f. So now b is on the top, so the process will be the same. So we're going to start with b, and then b is divided by f, and then it ends with 1 over 2 minus q. So now you're going to go backwards and do everything the opposite. So we're going to start with 1 over 2 minus q. Instead of dividing by f, it's being multiplied by f, and it ends with b. And you can rewrite this equation. 1 times f is just f over 2 minus q equals to b. For these two questions, the variable that we're solving for, there's more than one of them in the equation. So the process is the same. You just have to look at both terms that contain the variable for a. So we're going to start with a again because that's the variable we're solving for. And for the first a is being multiplied by m. And for the second a, it's also multiplying, so I can put them all together, and it's being multiplied by negative t. And then the equation ends with g. So now you're going to go backwards and do everything the opposite. So we're starting with g. Instead of multiplying, we're dividing by m minus t, and then it ends with a. For the next problem, the variable we're solving for a is on the two different sides of the equation. So what we have to do is move that negative ma with the ra. So therefore, the equation is going to become ra plus ma equals to 5q. So now we're going to do the same thing we did earlier. So the variable we're solving for is a, so we're going to start with a. And a is being multiplied by r, and it's also multiplied by positive m. And the equation ends with 5q. So now we're going to go backwards and do everything the opposite. So we're going to start with 5q. Instead of multiply, you're dividing by r plus m, and then it ends with a. For this last portion of the video, we are going to focus on the equations that have a square and a square root. So for the first equation, we're solving for b, so we're going to start with b. And this time, the b is being squared, so you have to mention that. So b is being squared, and then it's being multiplied by 4f, and then it's subtracted by g squared, and then it ends with m. So now we're going to go backwards and do everything the opposite. So the equation is going to start with m. Instead of subtracting by g squared, you're going to add by g squared. And multiply, opposite of that is going to be dividing by 4f. And opposite of square, we're going to take the square root. And we're going to assume that we're only dealing with positive square root and then equals to b. So for the next problem, it's the square root. So the process is exactly the same. So we're solving for a. So you're going to start with a. And you're going to describe everything inside the square root first. So a is being multiplied by d. And then add by 3g. And then the whole thing is being square root. So we have to mention that. So square root. And then the last thing is it ends with m. So now we're going to go backwards and do everything the opposite. So we're starting with m. Opposite of square root is squared. And then opposite of adding is subtracting 3g. Opposite of multiplying is dividing by d. And the equation ends with a.